What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the band Tucson. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today I want to respond to a viewer question. So I recently released a video based on the concept of the failure of African leadership, and I talk about this leadership on the continent and throughout the diaspora, where I was just merely contrasting different leadership styles and what has and hasn't been successful as far as terms of sustainability throughout history through the various leaders. And I basically surmise with the concept that we have to understand that leadership, culture comes from the top, but the bottom validates leadership. The bottom or the people validates leadership. You can't lead without consensus. And so there is culture coming from the top, but this person would be rejected from the host body if they felt as though this person was inconsistent with their true core values. And I received a question, and I want to read the question because I want to make sure it was a well-written question. I want to make sure I don't take away from any of the vitriol from the wonderful words used in this question as I relay it to you. And this is written by a viewer, the boy King Aman. So thank you once again for this question, and it goes to this effect. The question is, how to cultivate internal and external leadership that can sufficiently influence the culture in a positive direction. Firstly, I would stop there, right? When we say a positive direction, and I think what's first in very important terms is we have the same definition of positive. And for me, I think the goal of a culture is to empower a person. And you're empowered by the number of opportunities or the number of options that you can pursue in your life. So the question is, how do you get a leader like that in the first place to that degree and to influence the culture? And as I said, once again, the leader is reflecting of a culture. First, you have to have a culture that believes in that. To create a leader that believes in that, right? And secondly, you have to understand that when this leader influencing the culture, they're going to be a reflection automatically of the culture. They're going to be an embodiment of in the way they eat, walk, and sleep. And if you find yourself in a country where you have duplicitous leaders, such as many countries in the West, it's because they prefer duplicitous people. They really don't want things to dramatically change, at least in the short term. And they fall for the okey doke. This is why so many American politicians have legal background. If you're a lawyer, it doesn't matter. You advocate anything. It's about who's paying you. The point of being a great and effective lawyer is your ability to advocate anything. You can advocate the defense of a piece of fruit. And that is how you are seen as a quality of a lawyer. How well can you represent your client's interests and get to the desired end case? It has nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of the parties involved. It's about how well do you understand the law, can utilize the law to arrive at what you want. And the same thing with leadership. And I think that's going to come down to one word that I'm going to use a lot. And it's going to come out in this next question, because he says from there, if the current culture is unable to produce leaders of worth, then what needs to be done to right the ship of culture towards the path of strong character? Once again, thank you so much for that question, the boy King Aman. So it's a very broad question. So I'll answer it in a spiritual sense and more in a literary sense. So in a spiritual sense first, and in a literal sense, the same word is going to exist. Accountability. It all comes down to accountability. A culture where you do what you say and you say what you do. Tonight is a very interesting night. I come home and the Met Gala is on TV. And the theme of Met Gala today is basically black dandyism. Basically talking about a reflection of the influence of black style on fashion, um, through a form of dandyism. For those that know dandies, they're very fashionable people, tailor suits, etc. Anyway, the Met Gala is this big fancy fashion scene done every year in New York. From my understanding, I'm not the biggest fashion guy, so just forgive me on those details. Nevertheless, I find it interesting because one, this is completely condescending. It's completely condescending. I love when people like to put us on a pedestal. They like to put us on a pedestal, and then they ridicule us for being on a pedestal. Nobody asks for these things, right? We don't ask for these things. We ask for work in schools. We ask for functioning neighborhoods, good streets. They're like, no, we're gonna give you an honor to your fashion sense. And then our elites attend these things. Like we don't got bigger problems going on, right? We're deficient economically. We're deficient social economically. We're deficient academically. We're deficient industrially. And all the metrics that lead to greater options and choices, we are shown to be laggards. This is a problem for some people. It's not a problem for others. For me, in the culture I promote, this is a problem. And the fact that we have people playing dress up, coming to the party as if they are the organizers of the party, but they're mere guests, honorary guests. And I find that the height of condescension. You have situations where women are calling kids niggers, making $500,000, and the best our leadership or our elites do is look pretty. They want to look pretty. They want to put on outfits and they want to go to balls. And this is where I talk about the people. When these people sing, do you dance? When they talk, do you listen? What are your priorities? Because you validate these people. You are their source, their livelihood. You attend their shows. You listen to their interviews. You watch these fiascos. And the question is, have you asked yourself, are you being accountable? And that's what it fundamentally comes down to. When I think about cultures that did what had to be done in the grand scheme of things, well, of course, one of the great societies that turned on a dime is Japan. And Japan set so many great precedents, truly exceptional in many regards, despite their setbacks. And they're still alive and kicking to some degree. But what's so exceptional about this situation is they did it outside of, from a point of weakness. In the mid to late 19th century, when the Americans sent over Commodore Perry and his Black Hole ships, and they basically said, Japan, open up your doors, let us in, or else. Japan looked at the existential threat to their people for what it was, and they decided to concede, and they welcomed the Americans in. From that point on, they recognized they had a great culture, a great history with the samurai. But they understood the days of the samurais were days of the past. The methods of the samurais will die, but the spirit will live on in an evolutionized form. In order for the people to live on, they made a change that was necessary. And they wasn't bitter. They didn't have marches in the streets for Americans to leave. What they said was, bring us our best and brightest, and let's send them out into the world. They sent out their scholars to the world, and everywhere they found the best, they copied. They went to the universities, they copied universities. When they went to learn about the military, they learned from the Germans. When they went to know about the Navy, they learned from the British. And they suffered because you got to remember the Japanese were the first non-Western developed country. They were the first nation to step on a scene that wasn't part of the West. So you can imagine a type of denigration they received. And slowly but surely, they developed their empire. The fame of Japanese bravery throughout World War I and World War II are well renowned. They even faced down their gigantic neighbor China, which to this day is a cause of much of the schism between these two countries. Japan's performance at this time. But what Japan understood is they had to break some eggs to make a cake. And they weren't going to be deterred from that. And that's the only way it's been done. And Japan, they achieved much. And they've had great setbacks. Most of all with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But even to this day, with the declining population, Japanese people are still proud. Even after 2 atomic bombs, Japanese people are still proud, functional, ambitious, driving. Still one of the largest economies on the world, despite a decline in population, is still top 5. The economy, they've pretty much been the inspiration for nearly every developing country, China included, Korea included, many of the countries they even conquered during this phase because they saw Japan open the door. They was the first to do it. They were the Jackie Robinsons of economic development. They broke the color barrier. And it inspired the other countries that thought they were just as good as better than the Japanese to do it as well. And the same thing can go with China. The Communist Party, they weren't brilliant people at the beginning. These are communists, these are Marxists. They destroyed that country. But the same leadership that destroyed that country, right? Or the same structural leadership, right? The Communist Party was also a party that said, okay, enough is enough. We're not succeeding. We have to be accountable to our people. And they changed that economy around to market liberalization. Until now, China is considered the largest economy in the world. And the confidence of the Chinese leader, Deng Xiaoping, to go to Singapore, another country that pretty much embraced development and swallowed its pride to do so. It opened up its economy. It doesn't do what Captain Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso. They opened their economy up, Singapore, because they knew they were too small to generate the economic development they wanted. So they brought in, as a host, the guests of the world. And they made themselves an oasis, and at the time, a very tough part of the world in Southeast Asia. But when Deng Xiaoping went down there, the Chinese leader that transformed his economy, he saw Singapore, and he saw Singapore full of Chinese people, mind you. He said, if this is Singapore, I'm going to build 1,000 Singapores in China. Because he knew if Chinese people could build a great city in Singapore, the homeland of Chinese people in China can build 1,000 Singapores. And they have set out on that mission. So this is what I talk about accountability. These are leaderships which are accountable. But they're accountable because they were raised in homes where people were accountable. And when I say that, it's no excuses. It's no excuses. And you have to raise, and I think that's really a great benefit of being an entrepreneur. We have to stop measuring our success and what we can do. We have to measure our success and what we control, what we can influence. That is the definition of success. And that comes from ownership. It comes from ownership. Because once you understand you are an owner, if your red wagon, as the saying goes, you can push it or pull it. If your red wagon isn't moving, it doesn't matter if the ground is uneven. It doesn't matter if the tire is flat. Whatever it is, you have to resolve it because it's your red wagon and nobody's going to move it for you. People will symbolically make you look like you're moving your red wagon. But nobody's going to empower you more than you can empower yourself. You will always be the greatest benefactor of your value if utilized properly. If utilized properly. So at the end of the day, it comes down to accountability. It comes down to what are you doing with your free time? How are you applying yourself? Some of these things are so easy. It's not even rocket science. And that's why I think it's always a hard question when people say, well, what can we do? When you're about something, when you set a goal for something, you become that. Whether you, let's say working out, right? If you work out and you say, I want to lose 20 pounds, right? You start working out, you go to the gym, you start to notice once you commit to what you say you were going to do, everything else falls in place. Everybody's different. The way they evolve, their body's going to react to different exercise. But you'll start experimenting with different exercise. You start seeing an exercise that you find to have a higher ROI. If I do this amount of time with this exercise, it benefit me. You start having dreams about working out. You don't even want to eat bad food no more because you know it's going to set back the progress of the gym work that you've been doing. And this is where I talk about accountability. If you find yourself not having these dreams, if you find yourself not wanting to reject the food, it's because you're not being accountable. You told yourself you wanted something you ain't really want it. But when you really want it and you're honest with yourself, doors will open wide shut. And it will light up just like the yellow brick road. And you'll know everything you need to do. If our academics are not where they should be, if our goals are not where they should be, if our community is not where it should be, I don't think it takes rocket science to fix it. I think it takes an honest individual to say, is this something valuable? But I tell you one thing it doesn't take. Putting on fancy outfits and walking on the red carpet. So I'd like to hear your thoughts below. I'm interested. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. And until next time, take care. Bad to up.